This week, how to get some good energy for once. But first, I'm Quinn Emmett, and this is Important Not Important. It's science for people who give a shit. You can hit subscribe right now in whatever your little player is to get this essay and my conversations with the world's smartest people most weeks. You can find the web or email version and links to everything at importantnotimportant.com or right in your show notes. And now for today's big question, how to get some good energy. So last August, you may remember, or you could scroll back in your feed, I wrote an essay about how my then 10-year-old, who was still literally soaking wet from hours of playing in the ocean, and who had every intention of going right back in the waves after dinner, how he really wanted to watch Jaws. Right. So our conversation, which you can imagine how it went, it inspired me to write about because he loves movies so much, because he loves the ocean so much, and because Jaws is an incredible, layered movie about, but not exclusive to, sharks, but also dads and local government and fear. How showing this amazing, legendary movie to him would be both a terrible and a wonderful idea. In both cases, whether it's terrible or wonderful or both, the experience would be irrevocable. It's Jaws. Of course, all the best movies and TV are. I used Jaws in that essay and a bunch of others as a jumping off point to talk about how making and experiencing intentional art can remind us of what we've accomplished together and how we can affect the world back, which we talk about all the time here. How we need to celebrate our wins and how the job is never done. So how Jaws, but much more so how something like Saving Private Ryan, which we talked a lot about in that essay, and 9 to 5, and Tootsie, and Selma, and Do the Right Thing, and Abbott Elementary, and Home Before Dark, and Hidden Figures, and even Star Trek: The Next Generation tell us in no uncertain terms that shit is hard. It doesn't have to be this way. We can do better, but it'll take all of us. And like I emphasized in last week's essay, we have to act right the fuck now. Now, those are all versions probably rooted in real historical events or characters or people. Obviously, there's a whole huge world of science fiction and fantasy that has the same ethos, and we've written about that too. But for this week, I want to talk about how Good Energy, the consultancy nonprofit founded by my friend, the amazing Anna Jane Joyner, and for which I advise, released the results of a new study for which they co-partnered with Colby College. And the study question here was simple. How many of the 250 most popular films of the last decade passed the new climate reality check? Now, before I tell you the answer, here's a brief reminder from the Fast Company coverage of what the climate reality check is, and of course its legendary inspiration. They said it's an environmental equivalent of the Bechdel test. It's a quiz as simple as Bechdel's famous measure of whether a film treats women as humans, and it asks just two questions. One, does climate change exist in the world of the movie? And two, do any characters know that? So the criteria for each of these films, besides being ranked on IMDb, which your mileage may vary, as a top 25 film in one of the years since 2013, were 1, be set on Earth. 2, be set primarily between 2006 and 2100. And 3, not really involve itself with high fantasy. And again, I love high fantasy, historical fiction, and science fiction. But the goal with this study, totally understandable, was to understand if movies depicting a grounded here and now, or relatively soon, representation of the world we're living in, which is vitally important because even as far back as 2001, 55% of Americans were alarmed or concerned about climate change. The result, 24 films of the original 250, almost 11%, passed both questions, is climate change in the movie and are the characters aware of it, and 32 films passed at least one. That's better than I thought. Now, it probably won't surprise you that despite not really being a sustainable business for anyone but Netflix, and only recently, streamers are overrepresented in the success stories because it was the equivalent of taking VC money and making things that were unprofitable. You could do weirder shit, like, for instance, stuff with climate in it. But related, there's this interesting little nugget from the study. And I quote from Fast Company again, among the 220 films on the list with theatrical releases, those that passed the first part of the test, climate change exists, earned, on average, 8% more at the box office than those that did not. And those that passed both parts, climate change exists and a character knows it, earned on average 10% more. On the one hand, fascinating. On the other, look, every single time a film by, including, and or for black people and or women overperforms at the box office, my dear friend, producer, and the Blacklist founder Franklin Leonard shakes piles of spreadsheets at people who are surprised once again, proving that this has always been the case, that they always do well. He argues that we should finally not only raise our expectations for these films, but of course also commit to making much more of what the people clearly want. Anyways, we link to the Fast Company coverage to get more context for this new good energy study, but you don't need another 3,000 words or half an hour from me to climate-splain to you why it's so consequential, truly, that we see a diverse set of characters on screen persevering through hard shit we can all relate to. A climate or public health story doesn't need to hit you over the head. It doesn't need to literally be about sea level rise, Gary, but to really connect, it does need to be intentional. So, is it a beloved romantic comedy about loving people for who they are, about risking everything in your relationships, like Bridget Jones? Into it. That's what we talked about last week. Is it for kids but still real as hell and makes parents cry, like Bluey or Coco or Up? Great. Is it a horror movie for adults but actually manifesto on casual racism, like Get Out? Sure. 10% of the most popular grounded movies from the last 10 years is actually better than I expected, but we can always do better. And look, from Rocky to Wall-E to Glory, it's what audiences want. Remember what legendary film producer Lindsay Duran said. The accomplishment the audience values most is resilience. Whatever your art, one thing you can do, and not even for your whole career, or even a whole film or TV show, or play, or musical, or book, or whatever, is to simply set it in a relatable world, one that so many of us can touch and feel and experience the minute we walk out of the theater. 2, stock it with complicated characters with a variety of intrinsic motivations. 3, put them through their own particular worst nightmare. 4, give them some allies along the way. And 5, require them to show up and fucking persevere. Sometimes relatable, sometimes not. Protagonists coming out on the other side together, not unscathed, but still unbound. That's the good shit. That is good energy. Here are your relevant action steps. Number 1, donate to Eco-Anxious Stories to help create stories about meaning, mental health, and climate change. Number 2, volunteer to share your climate solution story with the Global Solutions Diary from our friends at Project Drawdown. Number 3, get educated about how to integrate climate change into your writing in an authentic way by booking a consultation with Good Energy. Number 4, be heard about the climate crisis and urge Congress to act more. Number 5, invest in a climate positive future using Atmos, ATMOS. That is it for this week. If you've got feedback, questions, opinions, you want to send me examples of movies and TV shows that hit the mark, email them to us at questions@importantnotimportant.com. Again, you can hit subscribe to get next week's essay or conversation straight to your feed. You can go back and find all kinds of great stuff. There's almost 200 conversations and tons of essays. To go deeper, visit importantnotimportant.com. Give us all the stars and reviews. Thank you for being a part of our community, and thanks for giving a shit.